Dear Lord Jesus, thank you for this day. Please help us. Thank you for these wonderful young people and how they want to live for you. Please bless this session, Father, as we talk about the lies in the textbooks and His science on the side of evolution. Father, please help me. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Go ahead, Danny Savage. He's got the coolest name on earth, Danny Savage. Go ahead, turn them all off. Big D, great soccer player. There he is. All right, let's push play here, and here we go. Thank you so much for being here. Is science on the side of evolution? I do appreciate your attention, and there's not a lot of, this isn't up very high. I need you to be quiet so everybody can hear, all right? Is science on the side of evolution? The Bible says in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 20, O Timothy, keep that which is committed to thy trust, and avoiding profane and vain babblings and oppositions of science, falsely so called. I've underlined science, falsely so called, because that's what I believe evolution is. It's not true science. Evolution is mixed in with the science textbooks, but that doesn't make it true science. They do the same thing with beer at football games. Beer is not athletic at all, and football has nothing to do with beer, but they want to sell their beer, so they try to associate it with the football, even though it has nothing to do with it. And as Christians, we can't be against science. If we go around saying that we're against science and scientists are bad and science is wrong, then we're going to get laughed at. As Christians, we have nothing to be afraid of from true science. Now, some of you have been here in the past, and we talked about the flood 3 years ago. And we talked about the scientific evidence for that. We talked about dinosaurs 2 years ago, and we dealt with the scientific evidence for that. And we talked about the Garden of Eden. I believe that was last year. So we've already talked about, in the Youth Congress, a lot of evidence for creation. But today I want to deal specifically, is science on the side of evolution? Or another way to put it is there any evidence for evolution? What about the evidence that they say exists for evolution? Let's get started. Who here has ever been to the Grand Canyon before? It's beautiful, isn't it? I remember standing there. It's about a mile down as far as you can see across. I was there in June, and it snowed, one of the rare things. We had to get jackets, and we watched a snowstorm roll over the Grand Canyon. It was beautiful. But there's two ways to look at Grand Canyon. We would all agree that Grand Canyon exists. It's out there. But there's two ways to look at Grand Canyon. You can look at it with the evolutionist interpretation or the creationist interpretation. The evolutionists would say it formed slowly by a little water and lots of time. Or the creationists would look at that same Grand Canyon and say it formed quickly by lots of water and a little bit of time. Now we'll look at some evidence in a moment that tells us what the truth is. But one thing we always have to watch for. Evolutionists are always trying to erase that line between the facts and their interpretation of their facts, as if that line there does not even exist. They want to say the way we look at the world is the facts, and that's the only plausible and possible explanation. You always have to watch out for that. In fact, this textbook says right here, the Colorado River has cut through layer upon layer of rock over millions of years. No possibility of an alternative. Well, is science on the side of evolution? Let's dig a little bit deeper here. This is an aerial view of Grand Canyon. Look at the top right-hand corner of the screen. The river enters the Grand Canyon at an elevation of 2,800 feet. The river flows downhill through the bottom of the canyon, but the canyon walls raise up to between 6,900 and 8,500 feet. So a few facts here. The top of the Grand Canyon is higher than the bottom of Grand Canyon. The river only runs through the bottom. The top is higher than where the river enters the canyon by over 4,000 feet. Rivers don't flow uphill. And there's no delta. This illustration might help make it more clear. The river goes through the bottom while the canyon walls go up. If that river formed that canyon, then the river would have had to flow uphill for millions of years in order to get the ground level enough to erode down. You see, there's no possible way that the Colorado River formed Grand Canyon. Now, this is solid evidence that says the creationist interpretation, what the Bible tells us, is absolutely correct. Grand Canyon is nothing more than an overflowed spillway. If you put a dam across Grand Canyon, a lake would form behind it that would cover several states. Once more evidence for a worldwide flood. Mount St. Helens is known as God's gift to creationists because there's a tiny little river called the Toutle River that goes through this giant canyon, and it's an exact 1/40th scale of the Grand Canyon. And we have evidence that there was a great catastrophe. And so, is science on the side of evolution? Absolutely not. For 270 miles, that river runs through the bottom. And evolutionists want to look at it and say, each of these layers, boys and girls, is millions of years. We can rewind time and see millions of years in those rocks. I don't think so. That reasoning is based on the geologic column. We have a perfect, inspired Word of God that has never been proven wrong. The evolutionists also have a Bible. The difference is their Bible doesn't even exist. The only place this geologic column exists is in the textbook. And they come up with fancy names, Cretaceous, Jurassic, Triassic, Permian, and all these things. But the problem is, it exists nowhere in the world. But everything they believe about the sediments and the fossils, it is all based on this geologic column. Once again, it's a fact the Earth has layers of sedimentary rock. No one questions that. No one questions that. But did the layers form slowly over millions of years, or were the layers laid quickly at the time of Noah's flood? And watch out for this. Evolutionists are always trying to erase that line and make you believe that the way they see it is the way it actually happened. So what about these layers of sedimentary rock on this geologic column? Well, let's look at some evidence. Take a look at this tree here. There's several petrified trees in Cookeville, Tennessee. This is one of them. But notice the bottom here. That's a coal seam, and at the top, that's also another coal seam. Now, these layers are supposed to be millions of years. Did the tree grow through solid rock for millions of years? And if these coal seams are different ages, how does one tree connect them? These are called polystrate fossils. And one of the solid evidence is that these layers cannot be different ages. The whole evolutionary premise with this geologic column is that there's all these layers of time we can go through with index fossils that tell us what layer they're in, and it's all baloney. These layers cannot be different ages. There's no erosion between the layers. You would think it would rain in a million years, right? There's no evidence of insects or anything between those layers. I did this experiment with my class many years ago. We just went outside, grabbed a bunch of dirt, threw it in a glass jar, shook it up, and sure enough, it sorted out into layers. These layers are evidence of a worldwide flood. Sometimes we see trees even upside down in the layers of rock. But what about this geologic column? The whole thing's based on circular reasoning. If you show an evolution of fossil and say, well, how old is this fossil? You say, oh, that fossil goes to this strata, and it's 100 million years old. Okay. And we know that rock layer is 100 million years old, and that's why we know this fossil is 100 million years old. So, okay, wait a minute. How do you know that layer is 1 million years old? Say, well, we find this fossil in there, and since the fossil's in there, we know it's 1 million years old, 100 billion years old. You see their problem? It's all based on circular reasoning. They use the rocks to date the fossils and the fossils to date the rocks. They do not use radiometric dating. I don't have time to talk about all those dating methods today. Carbon dating, rubidium, strontium, potassium, argon, lead-208 to lead-206, uranium-238 to uranium-236. No time to talk about that today. But they do not use any of those radiometric dating methods to date these rock layers. They only use a geologic column. They only select the dates that they want that fit their theory. This guy admits it. The rocks do date the fossils, but the fossils date the rocks more accurately. Circular reasoning. Stratigraphy cannot avoid this kind of reasoning if it insists. Well, what about those index fossils? Aren't these all these strange creatures that arose through time? I don't think so. They used to believe graptolites were index fossils or 410-year-old rock. So boys and girls, if you find graptolites in your rock, you know that rock is 410 million years old. One problem with that, graptolites are still alive in the South Pacific today. Couldn't be an index fossil for anything. They did the same thing with a lobe-finned fish. Boys and girls, if you find a lobe-finned fish, you know that that fish is 325 million years old. I don't think so. Coelacanths are still alive today. Lobe-finned fish. Well, Mr. Evans, doesn't petrification take millions of years? I don't think so either. Here's a petrified cowboy boot with a cowboy's leg still in it. I know, it's gross. We'll leave it up on the screen for a minute so you can all just stare at that bone. Yes. How exciting. In the 1830s, we got to move on. In the 1830s, Charles Darwin traveled and he sailed to the Galapagos Island. And while he was there, he observed 14 varieties of finches. They had different beak shapes. And Darwin had an epiphany. He said, well, I bet all these birds had a common ancestor. He was right. But it was a bird. It wasn't a hamster. It wasn't a blue whale. It wasn't a great sequoia tree. It was a bird. See, Mr. Evans, he doesn't believe all that. Oh, yes, he does. Look what Darwin said in his book. It is a truly wonderful fact that all animals and all plants, throughout all time and space, should be related to each other. He's saying here that the bird and the tomato plant and the T-Rex and all the grass, it all has a common ancestor. Here was the problem. What Charles Darwin observed is what's known as microevolution. Now, that's a poor term. Really, it's just variation within the created kind. It states that, well, dogs produce a variety of dogs, and roses produce a variety of roses, and variation happens. No question about that. God designed creatures with the incredible ability to adapt to their environment. Does your car have a heater and air conditioner? I hope it does. In Tennessee, you need both. Well, why do they put both in there? Well, they don't know whether the car is going to Florida or Alaska or somewhere in between. You see, God designed creatures with the ability to adjust to the environment so they could be strong. But the problem is this. Evolutionists want to show you 1,000 examples of this tiny variation and expect you to believe that, well, the other definitions. We'll get to that in a moment. It's a fact that dogs produce a variety of dogs. And what about those dogs? I remember in the debate between Bill Nye and Ken Ham, Bill Nye said, "You think all those dogs in the world came from 2 dogs on Noah's Ark? I mean, you believe in more evolution than I do." Really? He believes all the dogs came from a rock. I don't think so. What about those dogs? Look here. Let me see if I can read this. Dogs today come in all shapes and sizes, but scientists believe they evolved from just a handful of wolves tamed by humans living on or near China less than 15,000 years ago. These aren't Christian people. They're just doing research. Oh, they're getting closer. Look at this. It looks as if 95% of the current dogs come from just three original founding females. They're getting closer. You see, when you get done climbing the mountain of truth, you realize that those who believe the Bible have been sitting there all along. See, for evolution to be true, there has to be 6 definitions of evolution. The first is cosmic evolution. That's the origin of time, space, and matter. Big Bang. They don't know what exploded, where it came from, how it got here. So they believe in the beginning dirt. We believe in the beginning God. Don't tell me that there's a science and ours is religion. In fact, it takes more faith to believe what they believe than what we do. Dwayne Gish said, "It's incredible what an unbeliever must believe to be an unbeliever." Then they have to believe in chemical evolution. That's the origin of higher elements. You want to tell me that platinum evolved from hydrogen? And why does it not evolve today? They never explain that. They have no good argument for chemical evolution. What about stars and planets? How did they evolve? We never see them evolve today. We see them blow up. We never see them form. What about the organic evolution? That's where life came from. I mean, why is it that they expect to happen by chance in nature what all the technology today cannot do? They cannot make any non-living thing come alive, and they want to tell me it happened by chance? And then after all that, they have to believe in macroevolution. That is where one animal could changes into a completely different kind of other animal. Now, this 6th one, this is where it gets sneaky. Microevolution, variation within kinds. This one does happen. And like I said, they will show you thousands of examples of these tiny changes and expect you to believe the first 5. The first 5 are completely religious. You have to accept them by faith. That's why evolution, I always capitalize it with a capital E. It's a religion that they must believe. It's never been observed, never been demonstrated, and they have to accept it by faith. Don't get tricked now by them saying the microevolutions. Well, Mr. Evans, what if we added up, hundreds or millions of years of microevolution? Wouldn't that equal a macroevolution change? Well, I don't think so either. Variations happen, but there are limits. The past 100 years, millions, maybe billions of dollars has been spent to try to get faster horses and to win the races. Well, in 100 years of expensive selective breeding over time, the average time has gone from 127 to 123. 4 seconds in 100 years. I think they're getting close to the limit of how fast horses can run. But I have a question. If evolution is true, why don't they just evolve wings? Why can't they get the horse to go any faster? You see, variations happen in nature, no question. But there are limits to the variation within the created kinds. God didn't say animals would reproduce after their species. He said they'd reproduce after their kind. That's all we've ever seen. It follows what we've observed in science. They tried to increase the sugar content of beets from 6% to make them much sweeter, make kids eat them, but it stopped at 17. Once it got to 17%, no further increase was possible. Variations happen, but there are limits. Farmers try to get bigger and bigger pigs. They're never going to get a pig as big as Tennessee. There's limits at how much variation there is in the created kinds. Like I said, I'm sorry. I know I'm moving fast, and I appreciate you listening. What about natural selection? Can natural selection change an animal into another kind of animal? Creationists have no argument with natural selection. In fact, we thought of it first. It's only a conservative process that removes defective organisms and keeps the species strong. I love hunting, and I might have 2 3.5-year-old buck on my property, and let's say they get together. One's got giant antlers, big and strong. One's weak and puny. They go at it with their antlers, and the big one beats up the little one. He runs off. The one that wins gets the does. He passes off his genes to the offspring. Survival of the fittest. Natural selection. A cheetah goes and chases a whole herd of gazelles. The slowest gazelle gets caught. The one that's weak gets caught. The fastest gazelle rarely ever gets caught. He survives and passes on his genes. It's just God's quality control. That's all it is. It has nothing to do with changing a creature. And natural selection can only select. It cannot create anything. Let me use this analogy. We have some car manufacturing in Tennessee. And let's talk about the quality control. Let's say before they roll that car out on the lot, they send their quality control. Let's say they're experts, and they catch every mistake. They don't let any car off the lot unless they've checked everything. How long would it take that process to change the car into an airplane? Oh, they can't do it. Why? Because they're not there to change anything. They're just there to make sure you have a good car. And natural selection does the same thing. It doesn't change anything. Say, one huge thing with evolution is today's mutations. They want to tell us that mutations are the raw material for evolution. There's one problem with that. Mutations cannot create new information. They want to tell us that the DNA gets scrambled and there's new information that comes along. There's a big problem with that. Mutations only scramble existing information. Let me use this analogy. Let's take the words Christmas. You can scramble those to get lots of different letters, right? You can get has, Matt, Sam, Christ, Ram, Sat, Hit, etc. We can go on and on. I had my 7th grade class fill a whole board with words that you get from Christmas. But can you get Xerox, Zebra, or Queen from Christmas? No. The letters are not there. All mutations do is take what's already there and scramble it. And they're always harmful. We've never found one beneficial mutation. Even the textbooks will show a bad mutation and say beneficial mutations are the raw material for evolution. How come we never see any beneficial mutations? Maybe God made it right the first time. Check out this bull, 5-legged bull. There's no new information added here. Can the bull run any faster because of this 5th leg? No. Did he sprout a wing or scales? He did not. Did he already have the information to make a leg? Yes, he just made one in the wrong spot. So don't tell me the mutations are the raw material for evolution. That's impossible. Here's a 2-headed lamb, stuffed and mounted in a museum. Did he already have the information to make a head? Sure. It's a mutation. It made 2 heads. It didn't make anything different. Now, evolutionists can't convince us with this, so they try to get really small and dazzle us with big words. Now, I have 3 slides. I'm going to read them because it's complicated and I don't want to make a mistake. Here we go. Don't bacteria become resistant to drugs? That's a big evolutionists say this all the time. I've heard it in debates. Yes, we have proof of evolution because we see bacteria evolve. To advance their view, evolutionists have long pointed to mutations with beneficial effects. The most common example given, mutations sometimes make bacteria resistant to antibiotics or germ-killing drugs. For example, to destroy a bacterium, the antibiotic streptomycin attaches to a part of the bacterial cell called the ribosomes. Mutations sometimes cause a structural deformity in ribosomes. Since the antibiotic cannot connect with the misshapen ribosome, the bacterium is resistant. But even though this mutation turns out to be beneficial for the moment, it still constitutes a loss of genetic information, not a gain. No evolution has taken place and the bacteria are not stronger. In fact, under normal conditions, with no antibiotic present, they are weaker than their non-mutated cousins. Let me say it this way. Let's say that's the ribosome for the bacteria. It gets mutated. Well, the locking mechanism that the antibiotic is supposed to use, it can't lock on, so it can't kill the bacteria. So it's beneficial for the moment, but that still constitutes a loss of information, and the bacteria are not superior. Let me say it this way. Let's say that aliens landed in Knoxville. That'd be an exciting day, right? And they start handcuffing everyone and taking them up to their spaceship. Well, let's say there's a few people in Knoxville that don't have any arms. Can't handcuff them. So is that beneficial? Well, in that macabre example, of course it's beneficial. But does that mean that having no arms is superior? It does not. You see what I'm saying? These mutations are beneficial for the moment, but they do not constitute evolution. So don't let anyone tell you that mutations are the raw material for evolution. What about those family trees that adore the textbook? We have the evolutionary tree of life. One problem. Everything underneath that top line is absolute fantasy. They have no idea what happened. They just use their complete imagination and put animals wherever they think they might have fit. It has nothing to do with science. So don't let those evolutionary trees scare you. That is all nonsense and all made up. Did they create life in the laboratory? They did not. A guy named Miller and Urey, they took methane, ammonia, water vapor, hydrogen. He used electrodes to simulate lightning strikes. Then he sent it back through. He used a stopcock to obtain the sample. So he excluded oxygen because he knew whatever he made would oxidize. That's not scientific. He kept them from going back through. That's not natural anyway. But what did he make? He made a solution that the textbook says was rich in amino acids. That's a lie. He made 2% amino acids, and mostly only 2 kinds of amino acids. He actually made 85% tar, 13% carboxylic acid, and only 2% amino acids. Some were right-handed, some were left-handed. They did not bond together. They actually bonded more closely with the tar than they did with each other. It is so far from making life, it's not even close. It takes 20 amino acids to have life, and they have to be in long sequence and in order. So, but Mr. Evans, aren't we all made of the same basic 20 amino acids? That's true, we are. But does anyone know why we have to have the same basic 20 amino acids? If we weren't all made of the same 20 amino acids, then we could only eat each other. You see, the cow has to eat the grass and turn the grass into more cow. Then I get to eat the cow and turn it into more Mr. Evans, more than I should probably. But you see how it works? It was a wise creator that made everything from the same basic building blocks so there could be food chains and food webs. That's not evolution, that's a wise creator. What about homologous structures? Big word, boys and girls. They're going to be on the test. It always is. Homologous structures. We have evidence for evolution from homology. Do we really? Well, look at this, boys and girls. We've got a penguin with 2 bones, the radius and the ulna. And there's an alligator with 2 bones, the radius and the ulna. And a bat with 2 bones, the radius and the ulna. And look at that, there's a human. And what do you know? Radius and ulna. Well, the creatures did not name those bones. We did. But do similar structures prove a common ancestry? In their mind, it does. But anytime they want to tell us that similar structures prove common ancestry, that's just as much evidence for a common designer. There's another textbook saying we have proof of evolution from homology. Similar design might prove the same designer made them. Most of the cars in the parking lot have 4 wheels, right? Is that evolution? No. Maybe 4 wheels is a good design. It works. I did this presentation in Microsoft PowerPoint. You notice if you open Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, there are thousands of similarities. Why? The same guy made them. Doesn't prove they evolved from an abacus. It just means the same guys designed it. Anytime they point to similar structures and say common ancestry, it is just as much evidence for common design. And they don't talk about how sometimes the bones all develop from different genes in the chromosome. Well, what about the genes in the chromosome? They say that our DNA is 1.6 similar to chimpanzees. Doesn't that prove we're related? Well, I'd like to point out that that's still a gap of at least 48 million nucleotides. And a change of 3 nucleotides is fatal to an animal. Could not happen. And as we study more, we find out that it's not 1.6% different, it's actually 5% different. So the problem is getting worse for the evolutionists, not better. Don't let anyone tell you genetic similarity proves evolution. And it's surprising to me that they would use DNA for their theory. DNA is one of those complicated molecules in the entire universe. One person's DNA would stretch to the moon and back over 500,000 times if you laid it end to end. If you typed out the code in the chromosomes is more complex and holds more information than all computer programs ever written by man combined. You typed out that information, it would fill the entire Grand Canyon with books over 78 times. The information in the DNA code of one person. The Bible tells us in Psalm 139, verse 14, I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. The Bible's not using hyperbole here. We truly are fearfully and wonderfully made. You say, Mr. Evans, what about the junk DNA? Well, don't we have junk DNA? Well, hurry up for time's sake. We don't have any junk DNA. They're actually pseudogenes, and they draw away destructive enzymes. They try to take the junk DNA out of mice, and the mice were terribly deformed. I have a son. He's about 14 months old now. Let's say when he's 5 years old, I say, all right, son, go to my car, throw it anything you don't think the car needs. Well, you might as well throw it all away. Yeah, he has no idea what any of it does. That's kind of like when scientists and the great brains try to poke around and try to find out more about the human body. Even those who are at the top of their field admit they're just scratching the surface. Let's talk about the horse evolution quickly. There's so many problems with this. One of them is, look at this. They don't tell you this in the textbook. 18 ribs to 15 ribs to 19 ribs back to 18 pairs of ribs. Bigger problems than that. Horse evolution made by Anthony Marsh in 1874 from fossils scattered all across the world, not even in the same location. Modern horses found in layers with and lower than the ancient horse. The ancient horse, Hyracotherium, is not a horse, but just like the hyrax, still alive in Turkey and East Africa today. Ribs, toes, and teeth are different. South American fossils go from one-toed to three-toed in reverse order, never found in the order presented, and the three-toed and one-toed host graze side by side. Did not happen, class. The uniform continuous transformation from Hyracotherium into Equus, so dear to the hearts of generations of textbook writers, never happened in nature. Don't get confused by the horse evolution. It is all made up. What about vestigial structures? Ooh, big word, kids. Going to be on the test. Got to learn this. Vestigial structures. Do we have any vestigial structures? For years, they taught the appendix was a vestigial structure. When I was a resident assistant in one of our dorms, one of my guys had appendix he had appendicitis. Appendicitis, and he was doubled over in pain on the couch. We had to take him to the hospital and get his appendix taken out. Dave Livingston had to take out the appendix of a chief's daughter when he was in a missionary in Africa. So what about that appendix? They think we don't need it because it's used to digest cellulose, but that's not true. The appendix is actually part of the immune system. It's where immune response is generated. The appendix is required to activate killer B cells in your immune systems, like the thyroid activates killer T cells. Its removal increases someone's susceptibility to leukemia, Hodgkin's disease, cancer of the colon, and cancer of the ovaries. So the appendix is not vestigial. They say, well, but you can live without it. That's brilliant. You can live without your right arm. It doesn't prove you don't need it. What kind of logic is that? They also want to tell you that the whale has a pelvis that's vestigial. Now, this one is it makes you mad because whoever writes this is either ignorant of the whale anatomy and shouldn't be writing about it, or they're lying trying to push a dumb theory. This textbook, too, also tells us that it has a vestigial pelvis. It's just a lie. The whale bones are needed for the whales to reproduce. Those bones are anchor points for the reproductive muscles. Has nothing to do with walking on land. Never did. Just has to do with making more baby whales. That's all. And also the tailbone, the coccyx. They want to say it's vestigial. Coccyx is Greek for bird's beak because it's shaped like that. And they want to say, oh, it's from a tail we no longer need. We don't. Who said we couldn't need it? Everything about how handy a tail would be? We lost it because we didn't need it? That's ridiculous. There's actually 9 muscles that attach to the tailbone that you need to perform very valuable functions. You can read your Gray's Anatomy about that. But trust me, you need the muscles. It has nothing to do with an actual tail. And sometimes they show you a picture of a kid that's born with what looks like a tail. It's actually a giant wart. It's not attached to the spine. You see, when the skin goes back around the skeleton, sometimes skin's left out. It's just a wart. You take it off. So don't let anyone ever tell you that kids are born with tails. It's just a lie. Didn't happen. What about this one? We have evidence for evolution from development. This one's kind of sad because it's used to justify abortion. What they want to tell us is that embryos recreate their evolutionary history. You see, 10 years after Darwin's book came out in 1869, 1859 was Darwin's book. In 1869, Ernst Haeckel, he was an embryologist. He drew these embryos and he made them all look the same and tried to tell us that animals repeat their evolutionary history. I was sitting next to my cousin, and he was studying for his SAT test, and up on the front page was this very thing. They make it so you're going to get, if you answer it correctly, you're going to get the question wrong in your SATs, because they're trying to teach kids that embryos repeat their evolutionary history. 5 years after he finished his drawings, he was convicted of fraud. Those are his drawings on top. The real creatures are underneath. He faked it all. He was just trying to push the evolution theory. But his charts and this idea that the humans or any mammal or animal repeats its evolutionary history, scary with a big term like ontogeny, recapitulates phylogeny, that it actually happened. Complete lie. Complete lie. Over 130 years ago, proven wrong, still used about evidence today. What about, I want you to look at the human embryo in the bottom right-hand corner of the corner. Can you all see that? You see what looks like gills there? You all see that on the human embryo? They want to tell you that those are leftover gills from when we used to be a fish. Not true. Those folds of skin develop into glands and bones in the ear and throat. They have nothing to do with breathing. They never have. But why do you think they want to tell us that it's not a human yet? It's just a fish. They justify abortion. Say, oh, it's not a human being yet. That's why this is not only a dumb but a dangerous theory. They never have anything to do with breathing. Last one, we'll wrap it up. Dinosaurs evolved to birds. Who's ever heard, you may not believe it, but you've heard the idea that dinosaurs evolved into birds. Raise your hand. Now this is huge. You've got evolutionists all around the world scanning every bone they can with a magnifying glass, trying to find some hair-like impression or some feather impression that can prove that dinosaurs evolved to birds. And here they're so proud of themselves, the missing link of dinosaurs and birds. Yes, boys and girls, the T-Rex is alive and well today. Just look at all those chickadees out there. There he is. I don't think so. The dinosaur bird smashed in a fossil flap. It was a frog. Two different animal skeletons were fused together. Kids, you can't just slap a few feathers on a reptile and expect them to fly. There's thousands of differences between reptiles and birds. They're all developed the same way. Their bone structure is different. The lungs are different. The heart's different. All these, what's required in the brain for flight. Yet they still believe that dinosaurs evolved into birds. Andrew Fiducia is the world's leading authority on birds, and he's even a believer in evolution, but he recognizes the hoaxes that are out there. And there are some dinosaurs in China, fossils, that seem to have some fuzz on them, but it's not feathers. And even though he's an evolutionist, he at least is honest enough to admit that the evidence they're trying to push is ridiculous. What about Archaeopteryx? Every time I get my dinosaur model things, there's always an Archaeopteryx in there. And it had claws. 11 birds today have claws. It had teeth. That's unusual. A couple birds have teeth today. A couple birds have teeth. Not many do. But does that prove it's evolving? Absolutely not. Here's another statement from Alan Fiducia. Paleontologists have tried to turn Archaeopteryx into an earthbound feathered dinosaur, but it is not. It is a bird, a perching bird, and no amount of paleobabble is going to change that. Dinosaurs did not evolve into birds, no matter how much they try to tell you this, and it's in every textbook, every magazine, every museum. They try to shove it down your throat, every textbook. It just did not happen. By the way, how can Archaeopteryx be a missing link for when fully formed birds were already present? How can the Archaeopteryx be a missing link? According to their logic, birds should be up here. They find perfectly normal birds underneath. They don't want to tell you that. They only say what they want to tell you. Okay. Now, I did not cover all the topics. There's a lot more lies out there. I covered as much as I could, as fast as I could.